do. Oh, even that worked. It feels strangely timely to demo something about getting people to connect on the internet. We're all forced to connect on the internet all the time. All right, we're here. Welcome. Thanks for coming. One of the funny things about doing this digitally is that you can actually host a hell of a lot more people than we can fit in our office. So I'm glad you could be here, and I'm excited. I'm actually really quite excited to show off what we're about to look at. So as you can see, I've got OS 1 on my screen, but first I want to talk about a couple things. I want to give some context to what we're going to see, because there's a lot to, I mean, you got to know where this thing lies in the history of the project, I think, for it to make sense. So first, I'll do a little refresher on what Urbit is, why we build Urbit, and where OS 1 lies in the history of this thing. Then we'll do a demo, a real live demo. As to make it a very real demo, I just heard that something broke that I think we even fixed 1 minute before the demo, so that makes it even more impressive. But we will put this thing to work on a live network. I'll show off its features and just walk through what OS 1 is. Then we'll talk about what's next. In the demo, we'll also look at some of the onboarding. We'll go back and forth between me and one other person. And then, yeah, to close, we'll talk about what's next. And then we've got a great panel. Toby's here to talk to a few people about what we've been working on. All right, let's start with the most important question. Why? Why would you decide to do something like this? Why do we build Urbit? And it's actually pretty simple. Today, the software we use is so complicated. The server-side software anyway, I mean, the underlying software is so complex that we have to let giant corporations run it for us, which I think is kind of ridiculous. But at the end of the day, it's sort of simple. The result is easy to sense. We all live in it. It's basically this giant digital planned community, right? We only have a few options of things that we can use. There's sort of no escape. Everything from the color palette all the way to, do I know who's spying on me or where my data lives? That's all controlled by somebody else. And as far as I'm concerned, that sucks. And I don't think it has to be that way. So what I want, what we want, what everybody who works on this project wants, is that we want to be able to log in once to a single system where we actually have some agency over our software, ideally both technically, like we can read the code, and even just casually, like there's some everyday creativity we can exercise when we're using the things that we rely on. We want to be able to communicate freely. So I don't want to have a conversation with one other person and actually be sending all my data to Facebook. And I never, ever want to lose data. I want my cloud computing to feel like a permanent personal archive. This all comes from one simple thing, which is that we want to be able to trust the software that we use. We want to have an intuition for our software like we do with physical objects. We want it to just be there for it to work, and in many ways for it to be invisible. You can think of Urbit like a toolkit for building a digital home. We try and provide to you the basic modules, the basic building blocks that you need to craft your own digital life, to shape your software environment. And then so collectively, our hope is that people can build towns and build cities out of these things. I think today with OS 1, we're basically at the sort of Norwegian fishing village milestone, meaning we've got a few basic modules that people can pull together to build simple communities. And when I think about the sort of early days of the internet and what was so magical about it, it's that the tools were not super featureful. You didn't really need a lot in order to have sort of basically closed communities thrive. And I hope that we've basically produced a toolkit for that to be recreated or to happen again. But that's not all we're trying to do here. I think over the long run, what this should evolve into is a set of tools where you can build wildly varied digital places that are much more like cities. And the hope is basically that those cities reflect the character of the people that are in them in a way that this sort of digital planned community world never can. So my thinking is basically like, if you can get tools into the hands of the people that they actually own and control, you could see the digital world look like either a wild metropolis or a small town, and that would basically actually be up to the people running it, up to the communities to shape themselves. So this vision for this sort of flexible future is something you just cannot do with existing systems. Using existing systems for truly personal cloud computing is like an absolute non-starter. It's simply not going to happen. I think of Urbit as something that's very carefully crafted piece of software, which is the opposite of the sort of industrial grade software that runs most of the services that we use. When you want to host an app or a website for 1 million people, that's completely different from something that an ordinary person is supposed to be able to run and control themselves. And the latter, that's what we're interested in. And so to do that, to get there, we built some new technology. So let's talk about what that is. At the foundation, Urbit is just two things. Urbit is two pieces of technology. It's Urbit IDE and Urbit OS. Urbit IDE is a decentralized naming and identity system. Think of it just like a username that you own with a private key, and a system for distributing those usernames that's owned by the people who use it, not by one central authority. Urbit OS is a complete platform for personal computing in the cloud. It's a sealed system that stores your data and runs your programs, and ideally that delivers to you a very simple interface for controlling that whole environment. Everybody runs their own Urbit OS node. You can think of it like an overlay OS. It runs on top of basically existing infrastructure, any cloud server, your laptop, most phones, any Unix with an internet connection. So the combination of these two things as just pieces of technology, Urbit IDE plus Urbit OS, makes up the technical foundation for what we hope to be a high trust communication, collaboration, and commerce platform. So we need an interface for these things to make them make sense. And that's really what we think we've, sort of like made it to the first real 1.0 of. And so over the long term, where we hope we can get with that is to an open source, secure, and totally unified platform for your digital life. We don't expect to own this, of course, but we hope that we can basically sort of pioneer the toolkit such that we can deliver, such that we can deliver something with the level of interface quality that your native OS has. So for those who remember the days of the PC, this is what your PC felt like. You logged into one system that felt like your digital home, right? You could control what software ran on it, how it worked together, and so on. The closest approximation we have to what I think we're building is really like the super apps, as people call them, WeChat, Line, KakaoTalk in Asia. So these apps pull together messaging, publishing, commerce, some biometric data, even location data, and so on, in these really interesting and cool ways. And the most amazing thing about it is they're in a single interface. They have one serious problem, which is that they're totally centralized. There's no good privacy guarantees, and they're not extensible in very powerful ways. So I actually think Urbit has an advantage over these things in that you can extend them. You can extend Urbit. You can ship software to it. So Urbit is up to the whole community of people to explore, really. And I think that gives us a real advantage over these existing centralized alternatives. Although I think they're a pretty good preview. Anyway, we're not to that point yet. Although hopefully one day this sort of unified system vision will manifest. I think we've made a significant step in the right direction, and that's where we are now. So where we are now is we have a unified but extremely simple communication tool that we use every day. The main milestone for us is getting to the point where we actually rely on Urbit, and not in some trivial way where it's just replacing one thing, but where Urbit feels like we're shaping our own digital environment. And I mean that as the company and as the Urbit community. And the thinking has always been that once we can get to that point where we're sort of dogfooding this thing pretty religiously, then we can actually start asking people into it. So OS 1 is a milestone. It's really the point at which we're like, all right, you know what? We should put real energy into getting other people onto this platform and have them participate in shaping it in a way that we really haven't in the past. So anyway, let's talk about what OS 1 is concretely, and then we'll walk through what it is, show it off. So OS 1 is quite simple. It's a system for groups to share messages, links, and notes so they can stay connected and work together. It's extremely straightforward, and that's intentional. OS 1 is for getting the software out of the way, because what we want is for the human drama, the actual community activity, to be the center of the experience of using this thing. which I found, and I think other people certainly found, that if you try and use existent platforms for this, you're sort of sucked back into the world of engagement or, I don't know, software complexity that's not needed. You look at this picture, these people are here to actually talk to each other, and the chairs and tables in the street are not important. And OS 1 aspires to that same level of invisibility to some extent. It's not perfect, but I think it's actually, it actually gets pretty close. So enough of me talking about this thing alone in a room. The couch is heard enough. Let's demo this thing. Let's see it for real. So many of you have already seen this. We're here today basically to celebrate the fact that we have crossed the point of, where we've crossed the line over which basically we rely on our OS 1 enough that we're willing to and really want to share it and show it off in a different way. So there's no, unfortunately, I'm not here to announce the Urbit phone, but I do want to walk through this thing for people who haven't seen it and be very specific about what it is. So here you see the OS 1 home screen. You can see that the sun is going down here, which means there's no more time for exercise today. The primary constraint around which this clock was built. The clock is nice, but it's not the main event. So you can see that there are three primary modules: links, messaging, and publishing. We've got a Dojo, and we'll get to that last. And of course, the weather, some basic information your computer should show you. But like I was saying, OS 1 is all about groups of people collaborating, connecting, staying connected. So let's go look at what a group is, because that's sort of the primary primitive in OS 1. Looks like maybe you even got invited to a group. Oh, all right, cool. We'll take it. Anyway, here you can see the list of groups that I'm in, including this demo group that we just created, which I'm pretty sure is working. And then we've got the company and the Urbit community. So moving one column over, you can see here the list of people in this group. A group is private by default. It's invite only. All these people have been invited in. Some of them have set up profile information, and some of them are just using their Urbit IDs. And an Urbit ID, of course, is just a short synthetic name like Tacrite Sockripe, or I think people disagree about how to pronounce the Ys. Dirid Toknite. It's another Y. Anyway, Pinmeb Mopnire. And there are Ys in all of these. Anyway, an Urbit ID is a short name. It's actually a network address. You could send packets to it. And we automatically generate a sigil, so you can remember these things, even if someone hasn't set up profile info. You can see a profile includes some other fields like notes, but the group is just this list. The important thing is what these people share. So you can see as the company, we share a bunch of published notebooks to keep digests of what we've been working on, to talk about specific topics. We chat and keep up synchronously, divided roughly by topic. And then, of course, we share links. So links are just references to the outside world with a short comments thread, well, a comment thread of any length. So we'll walk through these one by one, but let's go talk to the interface team. I pulled them all into this group so we could just demo chat. I think if I open this chat, it should pull me in there. Oh, there we go. All right. So before we say anything else, let's see here. Let's make sure this is actually a live demo. All right. It's in fact a live demo. It's not so bad, actually. So when I send these messages, I send them directly to a host, and then the host sends them to everybody in the group or in the chat. Not everybody in the group has necessarily joined the chat, of course. So everyone here is running their own Urbit nodes independently, and the messages are actually being distributed in a totally decentralized way. Chat is chat. There isn't anything about this right now that's, unbelievable. This is the IRC. We all remember this, but it's a sort of fundamental form of digital communication. You have to have chat. Nice thing about Urbit chat is it's encrypted and authenticated. So all my messages are encrypted, signed, and sent. We don't call Urbit secure right now because it has not been audited. So you shouldn't put any seriously sensitive data into Urbit, but we're comfortable living dangerously. We use industry standard encryption algorithms. We're not rolling our own crypto or anything like that. This year, we do plan to get Urbit audited, and then we can sort of truly declare it secure, which will be super exciting when it happens, but that's for another demo. Anyway, here I am, I'm in chat. Chat is a protocol. You can imagine extending chat and making it do all kinds of different things like support say you could create chats that only are open at a certain time, or you can only send certain content types to, or you use unusual encryption primitives to do strong pseudonymity or whatever. There's a whole future for chat that's exciting to think about, because it's actually a protocol under the hood. It's an open protocol. Anyone could extend it. Anyway, let's see what these guys think I should show off. There's a lot to see. The interface team is pretty small, but these guys work primarily on putting together the front ends, and infrastructure works basically on making that the foundation of Urbit itself. Just for a little preview of what's going on inside Tlon. Oh yeah, I don't know if, this is an amazing links channel. It's just a links channel. I think what's amazing about links is that they're in a way unremarkable. Anyway, he's got a point. So let's go back through the groups. And I think what he's talking about is the one in Tlon. So here we'll go back to the Tlon group, people again, and I think he must be talking about the interface links channel. So here it is. So a links channel is just a list of links with the comments thread. It's like Hacker News or Reddit, but no upvoting. It's just a group of friends. We don't need to know what the most exciting thing is. We just sort them by most recent. So I think that what he's probably talking about is one of these, that where we've got some rich embeds going on. So obviously if I link to something like a YouTube link or a SoundCloud link, we embed the thing right in the page so you can talk about it right away. And I'd also guess that this is interesting to interface because we looked at a lot of electronic music equipment while we were thinking about OS 1. The music industry in some ways, or not the music industry producing music, but music equipment industry, both in terms of software and hardware, feels incredibly far ahead of software in terms of producing things that people can really creatively recombine, even in a super casual way. So modular synths, these monome pieces, are incredible in terms of their ability to deliver a super flexible experience to the end user, which is always what we hoped we were getting to, at least we'll get to eventually as Urbit OS develops, in that you come together with a group of people, pull these modules in and figure out how you want to connect them. And then you can, you can really start shaping your own environment, creating something new. So on the music, this music thread reminds me of something else that will at least take us over to publish. So you can see the one other module we've gotten to so far. So if I go back to groups, back to Tlon, pretty sure there is where is this thing? It's like, there's a missing feature here already. Completely lost. There we go. So started this a little while ago to catalog some possible future projects for us to work on. A published channel is basically just a list of markdown files, or like a collection of markdown files. You can really use this like a blog or a forum, since anyone can contribute a markdown file, like can contribute a post. Or you could use it as a journal if you decide to keep it private. Comments are also optional, so it can be more like a blog with no comments, or a forum if you leave comments on. Here we're using it more like a forum since comments are on. So here, let's open this guy up. And you can see that we actually render the markdown. And in this case, I think I was excited about this thing called the Buddha machine, which takes a few simple parameters to generate infinite ambient music. And my hope was actually, this is an early mock-up of OS 1, my hope was that we'd get a ambient music generator on the home screen, which I think is a good example of a sort of whimsical or just fun module that really should exist. Hopefully we'll get to this eventually. My hope is also that you could share patterns for this Buddha machine over the network. And yeah, one thing I guess I really like about this pattern of modules is that they don't all have to be sort of serious. They can also be really, really quite flip. But let's see, I don't own this. I want to show off editing, and I don't own this notebook. So let's go to one that I own so you can look at editing. So here's a post with a bunch of rich content in it, but it turns out that's just Markdown. And here you can see also that headers are nice. I find that if I put this in focus mode, it's not bad for note taking. Okay, you get the idea. Publish, very simple. For asynchronous communication, for us, we're distributed across a bunch of time zones. Publish is super important. So let's back up really quick, take this all in and look at one final thing. So we got messaging, links, and publishing. Those are our basic modules. They're pretty simple to understand. They capture a few modes of communication. You can see this set of modules expanding. You get the idea of maybe what a module is, sort of protocol of how we store data, and then interface for interacting with it. Under the hood, Urbit is a complete virtual computer. And we give a little preview of that by giving you a simple command line called the dojo. So we can at least confirm that I can add some numbers together. Great, this is a calculator. We can also run a common command, get some information about our ship, and let's see if I can actually get this right. Run some code here to confirm that this is actually a computer. Oh, there you go, syntax error, I blew it. Anyway, I think calculator is probably good enough. Anyway, for those of you who actually write Hoon better than me, you can start evaluating your Hoon here. If you want to dive deeper into actually writing programs on Urbit, you're gonna have to open up the command line yourself and dig in. But here you can evaluate basic code snippets and play, send messages to the OS and actually play with this thing pretty significantly. Anyway, you get the overall. Here we've walked through most of the features. And the next thing I want to look at is how onboarding works. Because one thing we've been truly guilty of over the years is not doing a very good job explaining how to get into this thing. And that's somewhat intentional. I think we always felt like, it's just not quite there yet. Like when we have an interface that we're excited about, we'll make sure you can actually get in here reasonably easily. So I'm going to switch over to Bridge. Bridge is the thing that you use to manage your Urbit ID. And I'm going to send an invite to Ed. And then Ed's going to take over and he's going to show you how getting onboarded works. And I think in the background here, I'm going to go and invite him to a channel so that when he shows up, he can get it. Oh, hey.
Hi, how's it going?
Let me turn this off and I'll send this thing.
While this gets set up, I can go ahead and introduce myself. So hi, everybody. I'm Ed, and I'm one of the designers who worked on the interfaces that Caitlin has just shown you. I'm happy you were all able to make it to this event tonight, and I hope that you all get to try out OS 1 soon. What I'll be going over now is the process by which I, a hypothetical newcomer to Urbit, accept an invite Caitlin sent to me and go through the general process of booting up a new Urbit from scratch. I'll go ahead and share my screen with you now. Let's see. Here we go. And you all should be seeing my inbox right now, my email. This is all happening in real time, so this might take a bit of a moment. I'll try to continually refresh this thing. But what we are about to explain is a bit of an experience by which I just receive a fresh invite. I navigate through a little bit of what's expected in terms of getting the ID synced up to the blockchain that is associated with its running, and then getting a little bit of a sense of how basic management works for the key in particular. So I'll try to give this a refresh again. And here we go. I'm now invited to Urbit. So when I navigate to my email, I see this invite sent by Galen, and basically there's some text explaining what I'm about to get myself into. But I'll just be clicking this link to get started. When I get here, I'm basically brought to an automatically filled out activation screen. You can see here that this code here is already displayed, and I can basically just get started by typing in or pressing go. When I read through this prompt, I'm basically told I'll be receiving an incredibly important piece of information that will be used to verify my identity. This packet that I'll be receiving is my master ticket and my management proxy, which I'll explain momentarily. I click the button, I download it to my computer, and I click here to unzip the file. And because I'm sharing my browser, you all can only see the browser itself, and you can't see the secret code that I'm about to be inputting and unzipping right now. But what I'll be able to show you all is a really quick sort of mock-up of sorts of what these files that I just received look like. So what we see here is more or less a representation of an ID card and a set of instructions for how to go about interpreting this ID card. This is all set on a piece of paper that you can print out and store safely in case you don't want to keep this around on any sort of digital context. This first paper that we see here is a master ticket. And master tickets are an 8-syllable key phrase for accessing your actual Urbit OS, which is a structure that constitutes your real virtual computer. Unlike traditional passwords, your master ticket is an actual private key. It's not a representation of a key you own. So you should probably keep this 100% safe and not tell anybody what it is. We think that this key structure and its relationship to your ID are a great alternative to the current ecosystem of hundreds or possibly thousands of different passwords that you use for the hundreds of different services that you access, including the additional layer of password protection or password managers that some people use. The second image represents a management proxy. It's pretty obvious that this thing structurally represents the master ticket, but what differentiates the master or the management proxy is that it's eventually going to be used for hosting your planet with other external services, all while retaining your full ownership of your Urbit using the master ticket, of course. So with the actual one that I received to my computer right now, I'll go ahead and log into the invite activation screen. So please give me a moment while I get that all set up. Let's see. Here's the information. And while this phrase is fresh, it might take me a minute or like a moment or two to get it correct, as it's brand new. So please, please be patient with me. You can see here that this is the interface for inputting this ticket, and I'll go ahead and type it in. Just trying to organize the actual windows on my screen. For all those of you who can catch this phrase as I input it, maybe you'll get a free planet. Here we go. So that was that. This is the moment in time that might take a little bit of time to process. Basically, I just need to wait for my activation to register on the blockchain. It actually shouldn't take very long, but generally at the maximum amount, it might take approximately 5 minutes. So while we wait for just a little bit, I can go a little bit more into what Urbit ID is, which is that while it is a basic authentication service for Urbit OS itself, we really hope that over time, IDs will accrue somewhat of a deep natural value to the people who own them, like a small personal item or like a totem or a keepsake. We really do hope that your Urbit ID can become an object that you carry around with you for the rest of your life. We're hoping that it does become that valuable to you personally. So it looks like we made it in successfully. Like I said, that didn't actually take too long. And now I can go ahead and describe what we see here, which is the interface that you should be familiar with, as Galen just used this to invite me to Urbit. The way that this is broken down is that we have an aesthetic representation of my Urbit ID, which almost looks like a real ID, right? Basically, we have my ID here written out, we have its sigil, and here is an aesthetic representation of the on-blockchain address that my ID has just been linked to. We can see here the invite group interface that Galen just used to invite me. It's empty, of course, and it looks like I can invite 3 others to the group that I've been invited as a part of, which is a cool feature of Urbit ID. The remaining functions here are just miscellaneous options that allow me to basically perform essential management options for my Urbit ID, such as moving it to a new wallet. But the last thing that I'll land on and explain in a little bit more detail is this boot Urbit OS option. Currently, this simply links to a set of instructions for self-hosting locally and getting everything set up on a command line. But in the future, we're hoping that booting in Urbit OS will basically entail the ability for you to, once you've gotten everything set up in the manner that we just did, immediately jump to a currently running ship immediately without having to fiddle around with the command line or any sort of finicky technical setup modes. Because the actual local setup process is a little bit involved, I'll just skip over to a ship that's already running on OS, actually, which in this case is BitBet Bulbul. This is great. It's nice and comfy. And check out that clock. It's no longer daytime where I'm at. This is great, but I just want to go ahead and check out some of the groups that I might have already been invited to. I'll navigate over to my group screen. And yeah, once this loads in and I receive an invite soon, we'll be able to go ahead and get a look at how this whole system works. Basically, one of the cool things about Urbit is that as a user, even before I ever actually formally get everything activated and set up, as we just did, any friends that I already have on Urbit can actually go ahead and invite me to any sort of chats or published notebooks or link collections that they may have already previously contributed to, which is pretty fantastic. But we see here that I've just been invited to a group. I can go ahead and accept that. See that a couple of members are already here. Maybe I don't want to set up my profile just now, but that is possible if I wanted to. And I can go ahead and check out these profiles of explorers here. What I'm opening up now is just a list of explorers that we're all discussing at this moment. And what I can do is go ahead and click on any one of these people and check out who they are. Navigate between a few of them and leave a comment if I like. This dude's socks are absolutely wild. And I totally misspelled that, but that's okay. Rad. So with that all in mind, that was a little bit of a nutshell of just how onboarding works. And with that, I'll hand this back over to Galen so we can continue this. Thank you all.
I think I got completely hypnotized watching that and almost forgot to turn my video. Okay, yeah, that actually pretty much covers it. So I think, one thing I've been thinking about a lot is like how, most of the people who use, like I was saying, we were trying to get to this milestone of we rely on this thing, right? We use it every day. And what I think that has always meant is basically that the people who are, I get to see a little bit of behind the scenes here. Here's me sending an invite. The people who are on Urbit, right, who are actually using this thing, are mostly people who are interested in Urbit. And I feel like the reason I wanted Ed to go through the onboarding flow is because what's super exciting to me, or the sort of next milestone, the next thing I want to get to, I think we're very much ready to get to now. And we definitely will be as we start hosting people. We'll talk about that in a minute. It's basically people who don't care about Urbit itself, and they just want to use this very straightforward, very sort of earnest piece of technology. Anyway, let's go through what's next, because you get the basics, you get what this thing is, so where is it going? So in a way, even to reiterate, we've gotten to this point where Urbit OS feels like an app. It just lives in a browser. You don't have to think about everything that's under the hood. But it is, in fact, a virtual computer, which means that it's vastly extensible. There's a lot for us to explore and for other people to explore with us. I think the future is very bright for this whole project. So next month, the thing that I was just sort of hinting at, we're going to start hosting a few small communities. And what that means is that we're actually going to run their Urbits for them, such that when they log into Bridge and they click boot OS, you just go directly into OS1. We'll do the management for you. We want to figure out, we want to figure out actually how to act as a hosting company and be able to share that information with the other people who've been starting companies in the Urbit ecosystem. So if you're interested in using Urbit as a group with, say, 20 to 50 people, please go to this URL and apply. We'll put it in the YouTube link in the video description, so you can find it there afterwards. Soon after that, we've already started working on what we're calling OS 1.1. For the most part, these are quality of life improvements. We've got a couple more modules in the works that we want to get out. We definitely want to work on notifications, which is not quite there yet in the current OS 1. And what I'm super excited about is we're going to start getting into developer tooling. So documenting the underlying protocols in the operating system so other people can build on top of them, even call out to them without learning any Hoon, without having to know the native language of Urbit. And we'll definitely work on performance. Urbit's actually, OS 1 has gotten significantly faster even in the last week, but we can still improve the performance overall. Later this year, we're already starting to think about OS 2. OS 2 is where we want to get to a native client, so something that runs on desktop, hopefully probably a more limited version that runs on mobile. Actually, OS 1 on a phone in a browser today is pretty good. And then this will come alongside hosting and a toolkit for hosting, where we can actually host a lot more people and hopefully encourage others to get into sort of the hosting business, getting to supporting the ecosystem. anyway, this is the later this year, things will get, I think, truly exciting, where you'll see the barrier to entry lower quite a lot. Having to host yourself is challenging, I think, is sort of unduly challenging. So seeing that go away will make a big difference. And I'll close on this image, which is the image that I think anyone who works at the company is probably totally sick of seeing this image, but most of you probably haven't ever seen this image before. This is Charles and Ray Eames, architects who are standing in the structure of the house that they built for themselves. And what I love about this image is that you can sense their excitement in living inside something that they built. They lived in this home for the remainder of their lives, 30, 50, 60 years. And what's exciting to me about getting OS 1 to the point that it's at is that this system is a system not only that we can live in, modify to our own needs, but we can let other people begin to modify to their own needs. So I think that the sense of excitement that we have about that is something that we can also now really in earnest share with other people. And that's it, really. I think that's it. Yeah, I find that really fantastic. I'm so curious to see where this goes, honestly. So the next part of this is to ask Toby in here, because I think we're going to pull together a few of the people who worked on this thing to talk about what building communities really means. There he is.
Hey there. Thanks, Gillen. Great. So yeah, hey, I'm Toby. I am a friend of the community and a friend of many who work on Urbit. And some of my friends who work at Urbit now, I also knew through online communities. And so Galen asked me here today to talk through the some ideas about online communities with the Urbit team. So I guess I would love to invite Ed, Matilda, and Ted to come online and be part of this panel. Ed, you've already met. He is one of the designers who worked on the OS1 interface. Ted, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ted. I'm an infrastructure engineer at Talon. I work on Urbit.
And Matilda?
Hey, Matilda, head of Sigwin on Urbit. I wrote a lot of the front end for OS1, and I'm a user space developer. I implement a lot of Ed's work, as I did on Urbit.org as well.
Cool. So we have heard a lot about cities and digital spaces that can reflect the personality of different communities. And Urbit, in my understanding, has always been a place for online communities to be able to generate spaces that feel home to them. And like I said, I met Ed and some of the other Urbit members through an online community that we were in together. I guess I would be curious to hear about some of your own experiences with online communities, online community management, and how those experiences drew you to Urbit. Oh, Ted, maybe you can go for this one.
Sure, yeah. Well, I got interested in Urbit for technical reasons originally. And then I got on chat, and it's actually one of the, I think it's sort of the first time I felt really at home. I mean, at home on the internet. Like I remember using, instant messenger when I was 9 or 10, and then got on Facebook when I was 15 or 16, or 17. I don't know, it was a while ago. But like I've been online for a long time in various ways, but there's something about Urbit that feels a bit more personal that I really like. And I think that a big part of that is the knowledge that there's no one central body holding the thing together. It's just, somebody wants to host a chat, so they run that on their own Urbit, and then I can connect directly to them. And there's no intermediary, there's no kind of third party there. And, like we can just keep this going as long as we want. And my identity is permanent. I don't have to, it's just, there's something like, it feels more homey. And like, I think Ed might've used the word comfy, which is a pretty good pretty good word. I think somebody said Urbit is like a digital pillow fort, and I kind of like that. It's that is kind of how I feel about it. It's just nice. It's relaxing to be on.
Yeah. Maybe I think for people who are less familiar with the project, or those of us who have been living in these big homogenous cities of social media companies, the casino jails, as it's been put, it may not be intuitive to understand what a digital space that reflects a personality of a community might look like. And I guess I'd love to hear what an example of that would be. Like, how would the system be different? How would the interface be different? What's an example of what a community that somebody might want to build on Urbit looks like? Ed? You're muted, sir.
I was waiting to raise my digital hand to see if anyone else would respond. But I'd love to, I guess, give a brief idea on this. I think that one of the interesting things about the way that we've structured out OS 1 in its present form is that, as many of you have probably already experienced who are currently using it, it's rather bare in a lot of ways. We've taken the pretty hard stance of actually making minute the difference typographically between a lot of structures that are visible in the interfaces. A lot of things are monochromatic for the most part. And this was all more or less a gesture towards this idea that what we are trying to build here is a little bit more of a vessel, and it almost provokes in you this sense that, oh, this thing is a little bit incomplete, or this thing could use like a touch here or over there, or this button could become magically skeuomorphic or represent a Winamp interface, for example, which I would love to see someone make someday. This idea that we basically created more or less this vessel of sorts for one to inhabit and make truly their own was somewhat of what I see to be this sort of driving mechanism that we were attempting to kind of embed into this, the various interfaces that we have here and that we've shown today even. I think with that in mind, a lot of what we were building towards in terms of the actual sort of size of group was maybe something a little bit more close-knit, something like a research group or a movie watching club, or a group of people who are working on a small project together. This is the sort of group that we have optimized a lot of these initial interfaces for. And so for some group of that size, it should feel relatively comfy, as I mentioned before. But the idea is to eventually grow this to be much more flexible. And I hope that we can introduce that sometime soon in the future.
I guess in my view, this has been a moment for online community formation. And I think, to speak directly to like the present moment, the really immediate present, we're also seeing a lot of people get online and interacting and communicating online. Why? But there's also been something in the last few years that people seem to be dissatisfied with social media. I guess I would love to hear why, this is such a moment for online community formation. Yeah, Matilda.
Hey, yeah. So what I always think about is like the sort of growing cynicism that happened. Like, I remember there was like these waves of like dissatisfaction. Like, if you remember LiveJournal in like 2004, there was like this mass migration to Dreamwidth. But then the same thing happened with Facebook around 2013, and everyone went to Ello for like a week, and then realized like, wait, Ello is like it's like an artsy platform where I post pictures, but like it's not really Facebook, and I don't really know why I thought it was Facebook. And so after a while, people got this like learned helplessness about it. And the first time I saw that change was when I first joined the Fediverse in like 2016, like late 2016, and went on Mastodon. And everyone was cynical at first, thought it was like a silly knockoff, until they realized that they could make an infinite amount of these things and call it whatever they wanted, and that it was literally there to like tweak the CSS, or like to invite only specific people over so they could have these specific network addresses. And it was like the sort of the first moment for like a lot of people in my generation, because I guess sort of like, I'm a millennial, that they could sort of like sculpt out a space for themselves and not really have to leave. And so what we're seeing now, I think, is sort of a sudden catalyst toward a need for digital infrastructure and for design that satisfies the notion of infrastructure, like of of not always having to do everything in the middle of Times Square, but like being able to like build a house and like to know what a house is, like where am I located, and like how do I make this mine, And so I think specifically now there's a developing need now that we've created these extensions of our minds to like bring them back in, like to reflect the mind back out at it, I guess is what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. But by the way, if you all have questions in the chat, we're going to turn it over to audience questions in a little bit. So feel free to start dropping questions in the YouTube chat if you're there. To follow up that question really quickly, why is building a community that sustains itself and has permanence and is robust so difficult on the mainstream social media web? Ted?
It's difficult because there are all kinds of things that you have no control over as an end user. I guess, like, as an example, I'm quarantining here with my parents, which has actually been kind of nice. Thankful to have them around. And we have to walk the dog a few times a day, and like, actually it'd be really nice if I could build like a little thing so that in our, a group chat that we have, I could have there could be a timer that would go off and maybe like assign someone who's supposed to walk the dog next. Right. And that's not like a generic piece of software, right? That's not like something that Facebook should put money into supporting, right? Like in maintaining that feature. It doesn't make any sense for them to do that economically. But if it's easy to mess with and it's just like a little something that I'm working on, like, yeah, I can like do a little bit of, modify my digital house a little bit, to make it just for me. And I think that it's actually one of those things where it's just really easy to underestimate like what we're missing out on from not having that. Like we just sort of take it for granted that like all the information flows and all the like the user interaction flows of an application like Facebook or Twitter, or even even sort of an application like Signal or Telegram, which in many respects are a lot better. They're still not. I can't make it personal. I can't make it mine. I can't kind of like rejigger it to operate the way I want. And I think that like, yeah, it's most people aren't going to be building their own houses, but actually most people will make lots of very small modifications to their houses over time, like a ton of them. And now that we're spending more and more time in these digital environments, and they're more and more key to our lives, like the idea that you can't kind of customize it completely, like you really should be able to. It should be completely under your control. There shouldn't be like imagine like you go to your you go to your bathroom and you want to like rearrange it, and like somebody comes in and says, no, you can't do that, right? Like, no, this isn't your bathroom. Like it's crazy. Like, but we're so used to that in the digital world, it seems normal to us. So we have this kind of like learned helplessness.
Yeah, I think you probably all have like further extrapolations on this question. So maybe, yeah, Matilda, if you want to also speak to this.
Yeah, I just wanted to briefly point out, someone said in the YouTube chat that the current like best meaning like the most common sort of actual usage of building digital communities is in Discord communities right now. And I want to point out that I have seen that primarily myself too, but that it is very, very strongly limited in that everything is a message. Like I see lots of communities that are like, they dump links to Google Drive sort of files of like anime episodes so that they can SciTube them together and watch them together, or they link to an Airtable full of EPUBs, or they just drop a PDF in, or they pay for Nitro so they can drop giant files in. And like Discord's like they're content with it because like how are you going to prosecute? But it creates a very transient sort of experience. Like what we want to do is like to acknowledge the same set of people across different activities or different sort of contexts, like doing a specific set of things together, like more than just chatting and making everything a chat. That's sort of the goal here, in my opinion.
Yeah, Ed, could you say more about how Urbit accomplishes this, and how information is shared across different groups and in peer lists?
Was that directed to me or to Ted? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Oh, well, you could go off too.
The last thing I wanted to add really quickly to both statements was just the notion that, receding back a little bit, what we found continuously is that what Urbit is an answer to is the fact that the internet as we know it now, all the resulting structures that we know now, even the comfy ones that are like tiny instances of like HTML communities that have risen up with people just editing one single document, it's that this is all built on infrastructure that was developed for the military. It was developed for the sort of industrial complex that is just huge and meant for industry. And what we look at now and how we think of the software that we'd like to develop is software that is much more human scale in almost a very literal way. And I just wanted to make sure that that was kind of a point that was made with respect to the previous question. That's all.
Yeah, that seems really important. And maybe it would also be important to discuss like how the different layers of infrastructure that you mentioned have produced these large social media applications over time. The way I understand it is there are very different incentive schemes produced by the architecture of the mainstream social web, and Urbit had very different architecture. So maybe you could talk through some of that as well. Jump on it, Ted.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really big problems with the sort of Web 2.0, social media internet, is that there's a basic conflict of interest that those companies get put in, where they're trying to provide a good experience for their users, but they can't make money by providing a good experience to their users. They make money by getting data and attention from people that they then sell to advertisers. And a lot of people are really upset about the privacy concerns of this, but privacy is just one problem and not that motivating for a lot of people. But it's not just a privacy concern, it's a usability concern, because they want to provide something that's just good, right? That's just what the people want to use, but it gets distorted in this way where they make it addictive. That's an explicit term that they're using, that they've been using for a long time. I remember going to a video game conference in 2011, and I watched a talk about how to make your game addictive. And normally when we hear the word addictive, we think of, something that we try to prevent in society, not something that we're trying to encourage. And this has been written about too, but I think there have been a number of attempts to try to build social software that doesn't have this property, but it's hard to kind of get a repeating revenue stream for that. It's hard to pay for it and make it and keep it running, because in general, and that's a technical problem. And this is the technical problem that Urbit solves fundamentally, is that when you're trying to develop a social application, like if you're going to try to write Facebook today, you could write the code itself in a weekend or something. It's really, the user interface, there's not that much to it. But what's hard is you have to store 1 billion people's worth of data, and you have to keep that synchronized, and you can't lose it, and you have to try to keep it secure, and it's very difficult to keep it secure, and every once in a while 150 million people's credit card numbers get stolen, and it's actually just really, really hard to prevent that, and that's because of this sort of client server model of the internet, where I'm not running my own software on the laptop, really. It's if I try to send you a message, I really send Google a message, and then Google looks at it and filters it for the advertisers, and then filters that information right to give it to the advertisers, and then sends it to the recipient. And they'll reorder the feed, right? They'll reorder all these feeds, all the timeline, not to make it most enjoyable or provide the most important information for you, but to put it in just the right order to keep you looking. There are all these studies about variable rewards. Basically, they make it as much like a slot machine as possible, because that's the way to sort of program a person as well as possible. Now, obviously, they can only do so much, but it basically, like, I don't know if you've ever had this feeling of like you've been like scrolling down your Twitter timeline for a while, and you're like, why did I do that? Why did I spend so much time with this thing? Like, was that edifying? Am I better off now? Was that really a good use of time? And then you go and do it again the next day. And that's because of the conflict of interest, right? It works to some extent. It works to the extent that you have that feeling. So with Urbit, because everyone runs their own software, there is no third party that has to spend a lot of money to maintain a complicated database and complicated synchronization, complicated security. It's just each person maintaining their own stuff and their connections with the 150 people that they really stay in contact with. And so there's actually, the human scale is really the way we solve this problem. It's a problem that shouldn't exist. Most people don't go and talk to a billion other people. Not really, right? Like, you usually just talk to your friends, family, few new people here and there. So it's actually the real problems that the way that the current internet works, the only way to build a social application involves solving this big problem, technical problem that doesn't have to exist.
Thanks. I think we're going to take some questions from the chat, which I have written down. Maybe Galen can come back online for this bit too. One of the questions, the first ones I saw, pretty straightforward, is what new landscape apps can we expect in the future?
Can you say that again?
What new landscape apps or modules can we expect in the future?
I don't know how to raise my hand.
Oh, go for it. I don't know. Yeah, Galen, go.
No, I think Ted first.
False positive. But I can say something about this. So like the one landscape app that I'd really like to have is just a file sharing app. I want to share music. I want to share videos. I want to share a bunch of computer science papers that I've been reading, all kinds of stuff. And I just want to, like, right now I have like 200 gigabytes of old like musical recordings and just like old files from a previous life, and they're sitting on my laptop because I was trying to move them from Google Drive to Dropbox and it didn't work. And I've tried several times and I'm gonna have to try again. And I just want to stick them in my Urbit and be done with it forever. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to do this, and then also be able to share some of those with my friends.
Yeah, who else has apps that they want to see get built? Matilda.
We got two that are really, really cool. One, which everyone's kind of pumped about, is like integrating various sort of digital currencies, Bitcoin, Ethereum, I think is already in there, but making a front end interface for that. But also, like, personally, I care about Monero, but that's kind of like a long way away, because then you can start to integrate them as like parts of the sort of invite flows that you have anywhere else, so that you could like pay me like a certain amount of money to join my group of people and like have access to my files and my chats and whatever. Because I see this model being facilitated poorly online all the time. People have a Patreon that they sell their art on, but you're basically just getting a Google Drive and you're getting Discord, and you're paying $5 a month, and you're doing it through Stripe. You're doing it from Stripe to Patreon to you. But there's constantly like the incentives of all the companies involved sort of brushing up against not just like who can actually sell things, because that's one part, but also just like how much they want to take at any point in time. Like, you're completely on the other end of a power dynamic there. Secondly, we want to make an e-reader application, like the perfect e-reader application. I'm kind of curious if Ed wants to extrapolate on that, because he has the drawn out thoughts about it, I think.
All I'll say right now in front of the hundreds and hundreds of people who are watching this is that I swear on this moment that we will manifest the best e-reader application environment of all time. I can't even de-emphasize the amount of book reading software that I've used, research and sort of like bibliography generating software that I've used. Absolutely none of it is good. Absolutely none of it allows me to share a collection or a library with friends. And absolutely none of the applications out there that exist allow me to kind of richly embed things or richly annotate and have actual discussions around books. I'm making this claim right now, and I will keep myself to it. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I wanna jump on that again, because I want to say how cool that is. If you could like pass an ebook to your friend and your marked up stuff's in there, like your whole group of people have marked up this book together. Like that's the most natural thing ever. And yet you can't really easily do that anywhere right now. I mean, Amazon does it by like harvesting like your eyes, you know, like when you open up Kindle, it's like you see like what by large people highlight, and it feels extremely unnatural and scary. Like they're like, how do you
74.3% of people highlighted this quote.
Yeah, they thought like these words were most meaningful, but like it doesn't know. It's just like it was just looking at you.
Sweet. Now that we've had 2 blood oaths tonight, another question that came up here is, besides Urbit's use as personal community social media infrastructure, what else?
Ungracefully interrupt you.
Oh yeah, go for it.
Interject. I'm still like, Zoom is too complicated for me. I can't figure out everything. It's like hilarious. There are 2 or 3 practical things I can think of that I do think we're still at Tlon, like organizing some of our thinking around like how can we rely on this more. So short messages, actually, like I think there's a way in which, and maybe actually popping the stack a little to your question about like what kinds of groups want to use this, or like do you imagine using this? I do think there's just this repetitive pattern of whether it's groups of friends or family or a small company or a small group of collaborators where you're already sharing like a Slack, an Airtable, an Asana, GitHub, a Google Doc, whatever. Like there's some annoying and frustrating combination of things that you're sharing. And so for us, the way we think about it at Tlon, and I think this does generalize pretty well, is like, well, what are we relying on that we would like to cut out and replace with Urbit? So yeah, we do use Asana and we hate Asana. I mean, we appreciate that Asana exists so we can use it, but it's way too complicated. We'd like to get rid of 90% of Asana for our use, like just for our purposes, doing task management day to day, it's way too complicated. So task management, short messages. So Twitter is actually like, Twitter's kind of amazing. It's like a new mode of communication, but speaking to the public is like stressful and annoying. Like 80% of the time, you want to be able to do that with a small group often. It's super useful. Better status indication. So being able to just like tell your team or tell the group you're in, I'm online, I'm offline, like here's where I am, where I was, whatever. We've thought about doing some basic work tracking or even some basic biometric tracking. So just tracking, activity tracking. I think there's even doing this in a really, really simple way would be amazing. I don't want to just know I don't want to know like in a calendaring sense what I'm going to do. I also want to know what I did. And I think you could do that really simply in a really nice way. And then, yeah, the last one is probably calendaring. So yeah, Google Calendar, the world is anchored to Google Calendar. It's all right. I don't know. It seems like it could be a lot simpler and in turn be better.
I think I'd like to jump in here and say that once we have a calendar, also, I think that's one of the things that we should also integrate is a video chat system into Urbit. And part of why like people use Google Hangouts so much, I think the big reason is that it generates a Hangout link for you if you set a calendar invite. So really like we should just have that feature in an Urbit calendar plus video chat system, and then that would be, I think, most of what people really like want from that kind of integration.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the short way of putting this is basically that being like sort of COVID making us all remote makes us focused even more on basically like remote tooling. So yeah, video chat. I forgot to mention that hilarious irony that in YouTube right now, you can see that we're all running the Zoom rootkit in order to get this done. We would like vastly prefer, of course, not to have to use proprietary video software. And there are actually reasonably good alternatives which could be integrated into Urbit. But anyway, that's a good, that's my suite of things, that some of which I actually think one or two of those we've talked about getting it even to like 1.1, like could come pretty quickly.
I just saw a question in the chat that I think is probably a pretty important thing for people who are watching to understand. Yoni says, still not clear on whether Urbit app UI equals the web UI that we see today, or are there bigger plans? This seems like it's a pretty important one. Hey, Galen. Hey.
Okay, so we haven't, I think we've clarified our thinking about this internally, but we haven't yet really communicated well externally, and that'll happen actually reasonably soon. One way to think about Urbit, and I mean like Urbit ID, Urbit OS, and especially Urbit OS, like use your Urbit ID to initialize this little piece of software. And then you can think of that thing basically like personal Firebase plus network plus, I mean, a whole bunch of other things, but it's just this headless data store that you push and pull data in and out of. So we wrote a front end that just lives in a browser. It's just JavaScript that's talking to Urbit. And it's speaking Urbit sort of native protocols, right? It's speaking like Urbit's chat protocol, Urbit's document protocol, Urbit's links protocol. And then as we add modules, you kind of add protocols, or potentially you create a module which is using an existent protocol, like a different chat that still speaks to our chat protocol, but it appears differently in the interface. So right now, we kind of like created this, I mean, I wouldn't call it a framework yet because it hasn't been formalized as such, but there's like a web framework for how you interact with Urbit. Should it be a web framework? Well, for a while, probably yes. Forever, probably no. There's a huge convenience afforded to you by basically like being able to do rendering in the browser. JavaScript, everyone hates JavaScript, but JavaScript actually, gets the job done. We've talked a lot, almost an embarrassing amount, about how you could have Urbit basically almost send down vector or something like that, right? Like just stream vector to a client, like tell the client what the UI should be like. I think that's really promising and interesting, but Urbit that I think is kind of like, that's much further down the road. And so in the interim, you can think of basically like Urbit just has data protocols, and then there are clients that do whatever they want. So one of those could be a web client. One of those could be like an e-ink reader that only talks to publish. One of those could be a sensor that only pushes data into some like a status tracking application or whatever. And so they don't all have to be necessarily in JavaScript, but I don't think we'll yet get to the point of like basically, driving a game engine for a little while. Although I think that's really interesting. Figma is a really good example of doing that successfully. This is kind of, I guess, it's an ongoing conversation in the office.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. So Urbit actually right now has two user interfaces. It has one that's this website, which is what you saw the demo of. There's also a command line interface. And then they're similar, but mostly when we're doing development on Urbit, we use the command line interface. But the so Urbit is a program that's running on your laptop, or maybe it's running in the cloud on a server, and you can do it either way. But one of the things that is interesting about it is that it can interact with the host operating system. And so like one thing that I really want my Urbit to do is something that it won't even show up in the user interface directly, but I just want it to track my my browser usage. Like I want it to just scrape the text from all the websites I visit and just save all the text, because just plain text is actually tiny. If you save all the text from all the websites I ever visit, it's basically tiny amount of information. And I wanted to store that and make it searchable, so that if I'm like, hey, what website, what was I reading the other day? Like I want it to be able to pull that up for me. And so I just wanted to take all that from my existing browser and then have Urbit sort of slurp that stuff up and make it searchable. And then once it's in Urbit, of course, then I can move it from machine to machine. You know, it's part of my permanent digital life, et cetera. And so I think actually, like there's a lot of, it's easy to sort of like think that just what you've seen here is the total user interface for Urbit, but actually there's a lot more to it. And there are a lot of other ways that Urbit can integrate with other services too.
Cool. So the last question I want to read from the chat is probably just like the best point to turn this back over to Galen. The question is, how do I claw my power back from Facebook with this? And with that, I think we'll end the panel and let Galen speak to how you can get more involved with this.
Do we Ted's like, I'm just not. Okay, you want me to just take that one? It's a good question. It's kind of like a funny way to phrase it. I mean, Facebook is only as powerful as you let Facebook be. So I feel like the way that one of the reasons that I've always been excited to work on this thing is because I think the attitude that Urbit is sort of embedded in this project is one that I do think is kind of, that used to exist in the early days of computing and has kind of petered out, but is not gone. And maybe we're some of the only people who retain it, but it still exists, at least here. And that attitude is basically that you can, in fact, invent new things and the world can transition over to them. And so Urbit exists in a way like there's sort of this foundation of belief that basically like the existing world of productivity tools and social network, like that these will just become ideas of the past. They'll just go away because they'll get replaced with something that's more efficient and just ultimately nicer to use. So in practice, I mean, I fully concede that, you know, while our onboarding has gotten a lot better, I think the interface has gotten a lot better, Urbit has gotten a lot better, it's not yet ready for everyone to transition away from existing centralized platforms. Although I think we're on the way to making that a reality. And so I think that the first step that you can take is basically to, you know, like try using this thing, onboard your communities into it as best you possibly can and contribute it to it if you can. Because it strikes me, and I mean, I've worked on this project now for quite some time, it just seems increasingly likely, I just feel like Urbit is better and better poised to succeed. And so, I feel like maybe there's sort of two embedded questions. It's like, well, what can a person do personally? You know, what can one person do? And then, you know, what are we doing? And maybe they're entangled in the sense that it's like, by using Urbit and contributing to it, becoming a part of it, because of the way that this is structured, you also become an owner and a legitimate contributor to this project. And so you basically add to the momentum of people clawing sort of their lives back from existing platforms. But I very strongly believe that the way that that's going to happen is because you move to something that just is easier or nicer to use, that makes more sense to use. And so I think maybe it's like, help us figure out exactly what that thing is and how that, how to make Urbit sort of suit or sort of fit those criteria to be the most sort of desirable platform. Like it's something that you use because of course you would use Urbit. Like why would you not use Urbit? That's basically the place we want to get to. I'm not claiming that we are there today, but we are getting close, I think, or we are certainly on the road to being there. That's a pretty good place to close, probably. Anyway, I've got one last thing to talk about. We got a few announcements, and then we'll actually wrap this up, shut this down, and call it. So I'm going to share my screen again and show you walk through the final things I've got to say. All right, there you go. You can see my login screen. And okay, so finally, and I meant to refer this earlier, everybody who RSVP'd to this, on Meetup. So if you haven't already RSVP'd, please do. If you've RSVP'd, we're going to get in touch with you to send you a shirt. It's a special shirt, or it's like an OS1 shirt and a planet, so you can actually try this thing out. So I'm pretty sure that it all has to be done over email, so it has to go through Meetup. Unfortunate reality of the existence of these things. They continue. As I mentioned before, a huge effort for us will be onboarding communities in the coming weeks and over the course of the next month or so, and ongoing throughout the year. But if you have a community that's under 100 people, preferably under 50 people, we'd love to hear from you, and we'll be picking some of those that we host and support in order to try out having people use Urbit in a hosted environment where they don't have to run it themselves. The next thing I want to mention is that we've been running Hoon School, so it's basically like a MOOC. I don't know if it's massive, a regular sized online course, RSOOC. We've been running an online course teaching people Hoon. That course is ongoing, so you can sign up for that at the URL here. All the stuff will go in the YouTube description. And every Hoon School grad, of which I'm sure there are some in the audience, you're eligible to participate in the Hoon School Hackathon, which I'm actually, I would never have thought of this, but we're going to run a hackathon over the course of, I think, a month. Don't quote me on that, where we're going to give away some pretty significant address space prizes. So you'll be eligible to win big chunks of address space by working on projects and building stuff. So if you're interested in being a part of the Hoon School community, which is pretty cool, these are all people who understand the system pretty well, go and sign up at Hoon School. And if you're a Hoon School grad, look forward to hearing about the hackathon. It should be fun. And then lastly, if you still feel like you have no idea what Urbit is, or you're sort of curious to hear more about it, we just released a podcast that our friend Arthur Falls helped us put together. It's on the website. It's called Understanding Urbit. And you can find that, of course, at urbit.org. And you can also find us on all of the conventional, unfortunately still persistent centralized platforms as Urbit. So Twitter, GitHub. I don't think we really use anything else. There's no Urbit Facebook page, and I'm not sorry about that. That's it. Thanks so much for coming. It's been a lot of fun to show this all off. And yeah, I feel like this is a good tradition. Maybe we'll do another one of these next time we have a lot to share. So yeah, thanks for being here, and we'll see you on Urbit itself, I hope. All right, that's it.
Urbit is a clean slate global computing platform. It's a complete redesign of programming. Urbit is a protocol, a language, an OS, a database, and a digital identity. No one has ever tried to build anything like Urbit before, and Urbit is completely open source and patent-free. Urbit as a tool is designed to be a personal cloud server. A personal server is a complete redesign of the cloud user experience. Instead of running apps on the developer's machine, you'll run the apps on your own virtual computer. You'll own and control your own data, code, and identity. A lot of people have tried to build personal servers, but no one has succeeded yet. We think the personal server isn't a practical product if it means a personal Linux server on the public internet. My parents are not Linux system administrators. But if it's not on the internet, what network is it on? And if it's not running Linux, what's it running? Welcome to Urbit.
When I first saw the internet, it was 1986. In 1986, the internet itself was a social network. The whole network was both safe and free. There was no spam, there was no advertising, no one even owned the internet. The internet won, we all use it today, but the internet also lost. We just use it as a digital modem to dial in to centralized servers. Facebook is the new AOL. As a peer-to-peer network, the internet is dead and it can't be fixed. And since we can't fix the internet, we need to replace it. And there's only one way to replace a network. We need to build a new internet on top of the old internet. And technically, our new network can't just be a copy of the old network, or we'll fail again. And it's not just the protocol we need to replace. One of the biggest technical problems of the old internet is that it's not just the 70s design, it's two 70s designs, TCP/IP and Unix. The next platform can't be broken in half. The OS and the protocol have to be defined as a single coherent system. So to really solve this problem, we need to redesign computing itself from a clean slate, and this time we have to get it right. I quit my job in 2002 to solve this problem. I finished the first full prototype of Urbit in 2013.
I first used the internet in 1996. For me, the internet was always centralized. I never experienced the alternative, but I knew it was possible. I assumed that the spirit of the PC would just sort of automatically extend itself to the server side. I thought the internet would evolve into a network of personal servers, since a general-purpose personal computer is such a fantastic tool. Today, there are a lot of projects trying to re-decentralize the web. When I saw the first prototype of Urbit in 2013, it was obvious to me that it was the right approach. There's a huge number of problems in building a decentralized network. Your instinct is to solve them one at a time, but that's exactly wrong. You have to solve them all in one coherent system.
Let's take a quick technical look at Urbit from the programmer's perspective. Urbit runs as a Unix process that uses UDP for its own encrypted peer-to-peer network, and HTTP to serve and query the web. It uses event-sourced persistence with an append log and a checkpoint, except that most databases don't send UDP packets. Urbit could be any normal database. But a normal database is a special-purpose storage subsystem. It's part of a computer, not the whole thing. Urbit is an ACID database, which is also a complete general-purpose virtual computer. We call it a solid-state interpreter. Imagine never having to move data between memory and disk again. Imagine a computer with one brain, not two. Imagine a world where a data type, a database schema, and a network protocol are the same thing. One concrete cause of centralization in today's internet is a difference in programming cost between a closed centralized solution and an open decentralized one. Let's say we're writing a tic-tac-toe app. In the centralized design, the game board is one data structure. Your score and mine are two variables. You'll be done in a couple of hours. As an open decentralized solution, you're building a federated system. You need a standard protocol for communicating tic-tac-toe moves. Maybe you should work through the IETF to write an RFC for OTTP, the Open Tic-Tac-Toe Protocol. You might be done in 2018. When solving a problem the wrong way takes 2 hours, and solving it the right way takes 2 years, it's going to get solved the wrong way. So why Urbit? For distributed systems, Urbit has pros and cons. The cons are, you need to learn a new functional language. The pros are, you get exactly once delivery of typed, validated, transactional, encrypted, and authenticated messages. It's still a little bit harder to build the distributed solution, but it's not orders of magnitude harder. Innovation is a responsibility. If you're making a big technical deviation, you need to show big technical wins. We think Urbit has these kinds of wins, and more than just these two.
When we say Urbit is in beta, we mean a developer beta, not a beta for ordinary users. Urbit's a lot of fun to hack around on, but it's still a young platform. I'm a designer. I'm here because I care about building tools for human beings. So let's talk quickly about what Urbit will do for ordinary people in both the long and the short term. Your Urbit will store and process your data life stream, all the data that you generate actively or passively throughout your life. As an open platform, you get to decide what code touches your data, and when you socialize, your Urbit will communicate directly with your friends' Urbits. It'll also publish on the web, which isn't going away anytime soon. Your Urbit will hold your keys and secrets, so it can act as a trusted agent on your behalf. Your Urbit name even becomes your digital identity and anchors your digital reputation. It'll be a long time before everyone has an Urbit, and we'll never get there unless we can make Urbit useful to early adopters without relying on Urbit's own network effect. One easy use case today is self-hosted publishing. Urbit is a great personal web server. Just drop some markdown files in a folder and you're serving a self-hosted blogger site. Another is as a complement to decentralized and blockchain-centric apps. Consensus computing is great, but you want to use it only when actually necessary. To realize the full power of a blockchain, you need to use it from a computer that you own and control. Finally, the area we're most excited about is API aggregation. In a way, you already have a personal cloud server today. It's just spread out across all the services you already use. It's a lot of work for Urbit to replace these services. It's a lot easier for Urbit to give you control over your data in one place by managing your services with their APIs. Your Urbit can let you program with and control the data in your services as if they were part of your computer. Imagine if you could LS your Gmail from the command line, or build a social feed that actually combined the stream of notifications from all your services. When you use an API from your own personal server, you're using an API key you registered for yourself. Most of the big services have terms of service that restrict the user experience of apps that use their APIs. When you have your own computer, no one has the power to tell you what to do with it. Certainly, no one has a practical way to stop you from using or abusing API data in any way that you like. And at the end of the day, Urbit is an open